Donald Trump held a press conference with Speaker of the House Mike Johnson yesterday. We addressed the subject of this in a previous segment, which was essentially election integrity, which, as many people have pointed out, is rather absurd given that Donald Trump is the only president in American history to have tried to overthrow an election. Nothing more against election integrity than trying to disenfranchise millions of voters to keep yourself in power. So, absurd premise to this press conference, and Mike Johnson was one of the most supportive individuals in that effort. So him being there is just the cherry on top. But I want to focus in on now a reporter who asked a question to Donald Trump on the subject matter that has been widely discussed since Trump posted this video where he sought to clarify his stance on abortion rights. And as we've covered now multiple times, seems to have aggravated everyone because he takes credit for accurately the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Thus, the majority of Americans are upset with that. But then he also won't call for a national abortion ban. So the conservatives in his party are upset with that. So making nobody happy. But here you'll notice a reporter asked a pretty basic question that makes Trump rather uncomfortable. And he sort of squirms around for a while and then finally lands back into his reoccurring talking point we've now heard a gazillion times. So here it is. The question is, over the years, Trump, you've considered yourself both pro-life and pro-choice. What is the accurate description of your stance on abortion? Now, interesting question, especially given the reaction you're about to see. We don't actually need to be debating this because we've seen Trump's record. He's been one of the most damaging individuals in American history to the pro-choice movement and to the rights of women with his responsibility in getting justice onto the Supreme Court, who ended up overturning Roe v. Wade. So we don't actually have to debate this, but interesting to see how he responds to it. Take a look.
Excuse me, please.
Just a follow-up. Over the last few decades, Mr. President, you have both considered yourself pro-choice and pro-life. Which one is it?
Well, you know exactly which one it is. And when I was in New York and when I was a Democrat also, just like Ronald Reagan. You know, Ronald Reagan was a Democrat. We sort of followed a very similar path.
Just going to pause your viewing of this video to ask you to subscribe. It makes a huge difference. Just takes a click if you're enjoying the content. If you're not, what are you doing here? Go away, haters. But if you like it, please click the subscribe button and back to the video.
But if you look at what we've done with Roe v. Wade, we did something that everyone said couldn't be done, and we got it done. And
so I will say, this reminds me of a different situation. Before I play the rest of this clip, there's nothing more bizarre when someone asks you a question to just go, you know what it is. You know the answer to that question. No, I think that's why they asked it, or at least they want you to specify what the correct answer is to the question. And it reminds me of when Trump, as friend of the show David Pakman has pointed out a lot, gets asked or got asked while he was president about Obamagate, the greatest crime in American history, according to Donald Trump. And his answer would be, you know what it is. Do we? I think we're curious.
I give great credit to the Supreme Court and the justices for having the courage to do it. What they did is very simply give it back to the state. And I'll tell you, the Democrats are the radicals on this because they're willing to have abortions in the 7th, 8th, 9th month.
Yeah, and then on to that talking point, just to clarify once again for anyone who's curious, nobody supports what they call abortions on demand in the 7th, 8th, 9th month of pregnancies. The only abortions that are happening then are, first of all, a tiny, tiny percentage, and are because of complications with the pregnancy, the health or life of the mother being threatened, not just because, as the stories they tell seem to indicate, they randomly change their mind or something. That's just inaccurate. And then Trump usually goes on, as he did here, to say, and Democrats support post-birth abortions, which we have a word for that. That's called murder, not abortions. So very dishonest there. And you can tell the desperation coming from Trump and many of those right now within the Republican Party is exuding. In all of these situations, number one, having to jump to a really dishonest talking point, attacking the opposition whenever you understand the opposition's stance on this issue is actually the more popular one in the country. So you have to make it seem more radical than it actually is. And so that's a desperate attempt to sort of muddy the waters and confuse people on this subject. Not to mention Trump refusing to just answer the question and starting with, You know what the answer is. Hey, Ronald Reagan was a Democrat. I used to be a Democrat. What he's trying to say, but because he can never complete a sentence like a normal person, he has to say it like that. What he's trying to say is that, yes, he used to be pro-choice when he was a Democrat because he lived in New York. And in New York, that was the culture. Even he was tainted by the horrible Democratic culture. And it wasn't until shortly before he ran for president when he had this big awakening and realized, oh my gosh, I can't do that. I'm pro-life. And so he's trying to say that he flipped around, but he didn't really actually make that point. And I think this is what Trump hopes to do on this issue, is just say enough things enough times incoherently enough where no one really knows what he's saying, and it's abstract enough where people can just assume the best, I guess, as they go in to vote for him, which is why we don't really need to, I'll say again before playing another clip from this, we don't really need to listen to what he has to say on this issue, because we can just look at his record and then vote according to that. By the way, I just remembered I wanted to plug earlier, merch, LukeBeasleymerch.com, if you want to wear merch like this. Here's the next clip from this.
Mr. President, while you were in office, you said that you would sign a federal abortion ban if Congress sent it to your desk. Why should Americans trust your word that you would not do it now if you were reelected?
Because we don't need it any longer, because we broke Roe v. Wade, and we did something that nobody thought was possible. We gave it back to the states, and the states are working very brilliantly, in some cases conservative, in some cases not conservative, but they're working, and it's working.
I've said this before, but it's one of the stranger things watching Trump deal with this issue, understanding how much it's hurting him, but doing sort of the Trump rhetorical thing, which is to just say something as many times as you possibly can, hoping that each time you say it, you convince a few people that it's true. And on this, he's really hoping if he says enough times, everyone wanted Roe v. Wade terminated. Everyone's happy with that. States are doing everything perfectly, and you're happy. So shut up about it and vote for me. Then people will think that's actually the experiences. When in reality, the fact that things were quote unquote sent to the states is the reason we're dealing with all the horrific things we're dealing with right now, state to state. And also, how on earth would it make sense to say some states are doing it conservatively, some states aren't, but everyone's doing it brilliantly? Aren't you saying that in some blue states they're killing babies after they're born? Is that brilliant? This lie you're telling? Or in certain states that you've even spoken out against, like Arizona, you don't think the Arizona Supreme Court decision was appropriate, then that's also brilliant. Two sides of this very divisive issue. Everyone's dealing with it perfectly. So just be happy and shut up. I think that's genuinely what he's feeling. And it's strange to watch this much discomfort every time he answers it. And the only thing he can go back to is his talking point of everyone wanted Roe v. Wade gone. I got rid of it. Everyone's happy. Good. Here's one random moment, by the way, where Mike Johnson spoke. Again, we already talked about this in a past segment, but this moment I didn't get to, which is Mike Johnson saying hardened criminals. And right when he says that, he points at Trump.
To invite everybody from around the world to come here, including hardened criminals and dangerous persons. And the result, we all know.
Yeah, I mean, true. Got that criminal right behind me going to trial on Monday. Alleged criminal, to be clear. But very weird vibe. Very, very weird vibe. Mike Johnson speaking as Trump stands over his shoulder and scowls. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel.